All right, good afternoon, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome to class. I'm going to go ahead and let you all know that you do have a Goyolshauki paper due for today's discussion. So please be taking notes, be ready for discussion, be ready for questions. I'm going to show you a couple of videos to get us started, to set us up for today's conversation, which is about the school to prison pipeline. So I'm going to show you a couple of videos first, and then I will introduce our guest speaker and we'll get started. Hope you're all doing well today. Here we go.
This is Jamal. Jamal is a boy who lives in a poor neighborhood. He has a friend named Kevin, who lives in a wealthy neighborhood. All of Jamal's neighbors are African American, and all of Kevin's neighbors are white. Because Jamal's school district is mostly funded by property taxes, his school is not very well funded. His classrooms are overcrowded, his teachers are underpaid, and he doesn't have access to high-quality tutors or extracurricular activities. Kevin's school district is also funded by property taxes, so his school is very well funded. His classrooms are never crowded, his teachers are very well paid, and he has access to high-quality tutors and lots of extracurricular activities. Kevin and Jamal live only a few streets away from each other. So how come they're growing up in such different worlds with such different opportunities for success? The answer has to do with America's history of systemic racism. To understand it better, let's look at what life was like for Kevin and Jamal's grandparents. Decades after the Civil War, many government agencies started to draw maps dividing cities into sections that were either desirable or undesirable for investment. This practice was called redlining, and it usually blocked off entire black neighborhoods from access to private and public investment. Banks and insurance companies used these maps for decades to deny black people loans and other services based purely on race. Historically speaking, owning a home and getting a college education is the easiest way for an American family to build wealth. But when Jamal's grandparents wanted to buy a house, the banks refused because they lived in a neighborhood that was redlined. So Jamal's grandparents were not able to buy a home, and because colleges could prevent them from attending through legal segregation, their options for higher education were really scarce. Kevin's grandparents, on the other hand, got a low-interest loan to buy their first house and got accepted into a handful of top universities, which traditionally only accepted white students. This opened up a wealth of opportunities that they were able to pass on to their kids and grandkids. Even as late as the 1980s, an investigation into the Atlanta real estate market showed that banks were more willing to lend to low-income white families than to middle or upper-income African-American families. As a result, today, for every $100 of wealth held by a white family, black families have $5.04. A 2017 study confirms that redlining is still affecting home values in major cities like Chicago today. This explains how Kevin and Jamal inherited vastly different circumstances. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. A big part of systemic racism is implicit bias. These are prejudices in society that people are not aware that they have. Let's go back to Kevin and Jamal. Against all odds, Jamal manages to be the only student from his high school to get accepted into a great university, the same one that Kevin and his high school friends are attending. But after Kevin and Jamal both graduate, Jamal notices that his resume isn't drawing as much interest as Kevin's, even though they graduated from the same program with the exact same GPA. Unfortunately for Jamal, studies show that resumes with white-sounding names get twice as many callbacks as identical resumes with black-sounding names. Implicit bias is one of the reasons why the black unemployment rate is twice the rate of white unemployment, even among college graduates today. You can see evidence of systemic racism in every area of life. The disparities in family wealth, incarceration rates, political representation, and education are all examples of systemic racism. Unfortunately, the biggest challenge with systemic racism is that there's no single person or entity responsible for it, which makes it very hard to solve. So what can you do? The first thing you can do is work towards becoming more aware of your own implicit biases. What are some prejudices that you might hold that you're not aware of? Second, let's acknowledge that the consequences of slavery and Jim Crow laws are still affecting access to opportunity today. As a result, we should support systemic changes that create more equal opportunities for everyone. Increasing public school funding and making it independent from property taxes would be a great start, so that poor and wealthy districts can receive equal access to resources. Systemic problems require systemic solutions. Luckily, we're all part of the system, which means that we all have a role to play, in making it better. Peace.
Okay, folks, so connecting that to what we've been learning, right? And understanding that we're dealing with systemic problems here. And so we need to address it at the systemic level. And I'm going to show you one more to connect it to the school to prison pipeline.
Phrase that you might hear in the news sometimes, the school to prison pipeline. It's shorthand for how schools are funneling students, especially Black students, into the criminal justice system. It started in the 90s when schools responded to fears about crime with zero-tolerance policies, which mandated suspensions and expulsions for certain violations. They also cracked down on little things like talking back or uniform violations. The hope was that it would keep bigger problems from bubbling up. But as a result, out-of-school suspensions have doubled since the 1970s, and they keep increasing even though juvenile crime rates have now been dropping for years. Around the same time, the number of police officers stationed full-time inside schools has increased by a third between 1997 and 2007. Ostensibly, they were there to prevent mass school shootings like the one at Columbine, but they end up being a way for schools to basically outsource discipline to the police. Schools with officers have 5 times as many arrests for disorderly conduct as schools without them. Sometimes the results are shocking. But the less visible effect is that schools are feeding the racial disparities in the criminal justice system. Consider the fact that schools are more likely to have an officer on their campus if the student population is more than 50% Black. You might assume that that's because there's more crime at these schools, but although students at police schools are more likely to be arrested, they're not actually more likely to be charged in court for weapons, drugs, alcohol, or assault, at least according to one study. During the 2010-2011 school year, 1 in 6 public school students in the US were Black, but they accounted for 1 in 3 arrests at school. Same goes for other forms of school discipline. Black students are suspended or expelled 3 times more frequently than white students. It actually begins in preschool. 18% of preschoolers are Black, but of all preschoolers suspended more than once, 48% are Black. Studies show that differences in behavior can't fully account for these disparities. Black students and white students are sent to the principal's office at similar rates, but Black students are more likely to end up with a serious punishment. One study found that white students are more likely to be suspended for provable offenses like smoking or vandalism. Black students are more likely to be suspended for subjective offenses like talking back or insubordination. Students who are suspended in school are more likely to later drop out or get arrested, so the federal government is asking schools to make suspension and expulsion the absolute last resort. In Oakland, California, public schools are trying something called Restorative Justice, where both parties in a conflict talk it out with a counselor instead of relying on punishment. The results are pretty encouraging. In the last 10 years, chronic absenteeism is down, and graduation rates are up in the schools that have tried it. Other cities and districts are also trying new policies. They're hoping that if their students end up in the criminal justice system, at least it won't be because the schools pushed them there.
Okay, y'all, if you can please comment in the chat, make sure you have your chat open. Comment in your chat if in your school you had SROs or police officers on your campus. Can you please do that? Let's kind of take a toll. Oh my goodness, lots of you. Ay. Okay, thank you. Keep those comments coming, please. Yeah, let's see how everyone's doing. Okay, y'all. So as you are commenting in the chat, it looks just like about everybody had police officers on their schools and metal detectors. While you're commenting in the chat, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce our guest speaker for today. And it's a pleasure for me to introduce this guest speaker because he is my life partner and partner in pretty much everything that we do together as far as educators, activists, Aztec dancers, and being consultants for school districts. So I'm gonna go ahead and introduce you to Gabriel Orosco, who is a former school board member and was president of the school board at El Rancho Unified School District. He's an advocate and supporter of El Rancho being the first district in California to require ethnic studies as a graduation requirement. He's currently a special education teacher in the city of Los Angeles for LAUSD and has over 25 years of experience in the field of education as an instructor, administrator, advisor, and policymaker. He is passionate about cultural diversity, respect for all people, culturally responsive curriculum, and ethnic studies, of course. Gabriel is a traditional Aztec dancer and maestro of over 20 years. He also has a master's degree in education and is co-founder with myself of Ehekatwen Philosophies, which is a consulting agency that assists school districts to establish authentic and transformative ethnic studies programs. Gabriel, welcome to our class. I'm eager to have you share your story with our students.
So good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing? Everybody all good? I'm just curious, how is anybody coming from LA or the LA area? Like you're at home? Anybody? Curious, just curious. Just wondering, just checking. How many of you are from the 805 area, Santa Barbara, Ventura County, all out that way? Camarillo, Oxnard. Okay, awesome. I am a special education high school teacher. I actually co-teach algebra right now. But I'm going to ask a couple questions because I was listening to the videos. How many of you are first generation college students? Like you're the first one in your family to be going to university. How many of you are that? Okay. Now I'm going to ask a totally contradictory question in the sense that how many of you know anyone who has ever been locked up, right? Anyone, friends, family, how many of you know that? Okay, I'm gonna get a little more nosy, a little more metiche, okay, a little more intimate. Like, so anybody know of any like extended family or anybody that you're close to that was possibly incarcerated? Okay. Wow, interesting. So I asked that because those are two lived realities that we have in our communities, right? First generation, like you all are kind of breaking the cycle, right? You're going to go to college, you know, if you have little brothers and sisters or cousins, you know, they're all looking up to you. They all brag about you. You're the one that's in the university. And then the other piece is our own lived experiences is like we do know and are in touch with people who have been incarcerated, right? That is something that is a part of our lives, unfortunately, right? So I'm going to, if my partner allows me to share my screen.
You're good to go.
Thank you. So this is actually one of your maestra's PowerPoints, but I thought I'd go over it because I went over it in my class. So I thought I'd kind of do it today. And so let's take a look at all of this and see what's happening in today's students' experiences, right? How many of your schools, how many of you come from open campuses? Meaning no fences, you know, and you kind of can go in and out of the school. Anybody have that? How many of you have, you know, big giant gates, everything's locked down. If it's on the weekend, there's no way you're getting into the school, right? So let me ask you this. How many of your schools look more like a school or look more like a facility, like a juvenile facility or a incarcerated facility with fences? Because I work in LA, so the old schools that we had looked like that. The newer schools they built, not as much. Okay, the reason why I ask is because the place in which we go to school, we want it to be welcoming, right? We want it to be inspiring. We want it to be open to our communities. And so I will ask you whenever you get a chance to go drive around different communities, not that we have all this kind of time, and look at the differences between going into a community of color, South Central LA, East Side, West Side, downtown areas, look at some of the schools. And then if you drive out to the other more suburban areas, look at some of the other schools. Just looking at them, you can see there are some inequities or disparities, right? If you ever know, there's San Marino High School. I've been to that school. Anybody ever heard of that school? Very nice looking school. Okay. So we're just starting with the aesthetics, and you got to ask yourself, when you went to high school, what did you feel like when you were there in terms of the physical structure, just the facility itself? You can see that the differences. So we're looking at prison-like environments. And back in my day, when I went to school, way back when, it was more of a prison-like environment, because I'm from the 80s. Okay. There were police dogs, there were armed guards. There were very harsh school discipline policies. If you were in a group of 3 or 4 and you looked a certain way, like if all the cholos were hanging out together, then can't happen, right? And then looking at the cutbacks, what's the first things that school districts cut? They cut art programs, right? And they cut counselors, social workers. Do they ever cut the school security officers? Do they ever cut the metal detectors, right? That doesn't happen. So I want you to notice that youth of color, LGBT students, and students with disabilities are punished more often and more harshly than their peers for the same misbehavior. And I know this because I'm a special ed teacher, and I see this happen to our students. Whereas it's very subjective. So if you're a teacher and you don't feel safe, you can basically say, you know, I feel threatened. I feel threatened by that student. Security comes in, takes out the student, it's on the student's record. How quickly that happens. So I wanted us to see that. I want to kind of break this down, right? So here are the numbers when it's broken down by race. And you can even include people of color in this, okay? So from school to prison, harsher discipline and more likely to be pushed out of school than white students. And here's the data to support that. 40% of students expelled from the US schools each year are Black, okay? 70% of students involved in in-school arrests are referred to law enforcement or Black or Latino or Latinx, right? Black students are 3.5 times more likely to be suspended than white students. Black and Latino students are twice as likely to not graduate high school as whites. And these are just statistical data and facts, okay? Let me move everybody. Everybody's in my... From foster care to prison, youth of color are more likely than whites to be placed in the foster care system, a breeding ground for the criminal justice system. Now, do any of you know anybody who's in a foster home or a boys' home or a girls' home? Does anybody know anybody? You understand that their obstacles in graduating are much, much greater and more difficult because they don't have that stabilization at home, right? So 30% of foster care youth entering the juvenile system are placement-related behavioral cases. We say behavioral because it's very subjective, right? Because the power of the pencil is very powerful. So if an educator or an adult says that you're threatening me, you're giving me a threatening look on that Zoom camera, right? I feel threatened, then that's what it becomes. And once that goes on paper, once it goes as a suspension or a referral, then you're automatically in the system, okay? So 25% of young people leaving foster care will be incarcerated within a few years after turning 18. So the other question is when students are placed in these facilities, are they being rehabilitated? Or they're just going back and doing the same thing? Is there an educational system in there? I'm going to explain all that to you as I go through my presentation. And 70% of the inmates in California and state prison are former foster care youth. So basically they graduate from the juvenile system into the prison system once they go in, right? So I just wanted to share some of that data with you. And then looking at the bottom, the color of mass incarceration, right? 61% of our population, the Black and Latino population is 30% of the US population is 61%. So 61% of us are incarcerated, whereas we're 30% of the entire population, right? That's proportional, right? So 61% of our communities are incarcerated, even though we only make up 30% of the entire population. 1 out of 3 African-American males will be incarcerated in his lifetime, and 1 out of 6 Latino males will be incarcerated in his lifetime. one of the key caricatures as an educator, or one of the key things that we look at, is third grade reading levels. Third grade reading levels. If you're not reading by the third grade, then you're almost destined to go into the school to prison pipeline. That is one thing that I remember from teaching English language arts and doing the data and running the data, is third grade reading levels. So you could even go back and look at the data and say, so which communities in the third grade are attaining their standards at the third grade level, right? You can go by school districts and compare, right? So this is just all the data. This is all the fun stuff that you have to write papers about for your maestra, I'm assuming. But just to give you a snapshot, an idea, okay? Now, this is my story, okay? Nobody else's story, it's mine. And so, meaning, I'm a first generation college student. I'm the first one in my family to go to college. I also am a high school dropout. I did not finish high school. I don't have a high school diploma to this day. I don't even have a GED. I have none of that. But I do have a degree from USC in finance, and I have a master's degree in education, and your maestra and I will be entering a doctoral program in the fall. Never graduated high school though. Never graduated high school, okay? And I'm gonna tell you why. So I decided to start with these cute little pictures. One of them is me, okay? I don't know if you could figure out which one is me, but one of them is me. The one in the middle, that's my daughter when she was a baby, okay? And the one on the right is my son. So my daughter's 19 now, and my son is 14. And over there is yours truly, little chunky little baby, okay? So this is the beginning of my story of trauma, tragedy, and triumph in my younger years, and how it relates to the school to prison system. Because everything that I just shared with you, I didn't know any of that stuff back in the day. When I was in high school, I wasn't thinking politics. I wasn't thinking any of those. I wasn't thinking about school to prison pipeline. I was just focused on getting in trouble, apparently. Okay. Oh, back. Okay, so I like to look at this in terms, and I know your maestra has talked to you about the Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror, and self-reflecting. So I'm a child of the 70s. Okay, so if you look over here, I actually have a family tree that we actually filled. I don't know who filled this out. I don't know if it was my mom or my dad. But my mother right here, she's actually Korean from Korea. Okay, she's straight up from Korea, and that's where my dad met her. Okay, he met her over there in Korea. That little tyke over there is that's me, of course. But the reality is my mother was never around when I was raised. The people that raised me is this lady right here, whom her family, everybody calls her Weta, okay? And this man over here, okay, who is my grandfather. Is anybody in here being raised by someone other than their parents? Anybody? Anybody else? You can put it in the chat. Me, yes. Okay. So shout out and props to those that are raising you, and you're not necessarily their child. It's a big sacrifice. So shout out to those who did. My grandparents are basically my foundation. My mom and dad split up when I was 2, and I don't know where she is today. Like I don't know where she is to this day. And also it's I don't have any Korean. Culturally, I'm not Korean. I'm pretty much a Chicano, right? I'm a Chicano because I was raised here in this city from my Mexican grandparents, Mexican-American grandparents. So here I was raised Catholic, like probably many of you, raised Catholic. I did my first communion on my birthday. I remember that day. I wish our other presenter came, because I would have showed him this picture, because at an early age, I wanted to be a Trojan. So you can see him doing the fight on symbols. And that is actually the original Los Angeles Rams sweater from the 70s. And I don't know who dressed me right here, but I was not into those plaid pants. And I was in line at one of the schools, but as you can see, the 70s were not very fashionable, I don't think. And this is also a picture of my mother when she was actually in Korea. And I just happened to find these pictures for this presentation. And I thought I would use them because it's an interesting part of who we are, our identities, right? Our identities are not only who we are racially, it's also how we're raised and who raised us, right? So keep those in mind. I was a regular kid. I played football. I played baseball. I was a gate kid when I was young. But one of the things that happened to me is that I was very self-hating. I was a self-hating child. Like, I did not like myself. I did not like my eyes. I did not like the way I looked. I got into a lot of fights in elementary school because a lot of the kids were make fun of me, or call me like a nipper and chink. And there was a song back in the day called "I Think I'm Turning Japanese." So they used to sing that to me, and so I would get in. Well, they would tease me with it, and I would get into a lot of fights. But nobody ever spoke to that, and that was elementary school. People knew it was happening. Adults knew that that was happening. They knew that that was the culture there, but they never really intervened, and we never really discussed like differences, cultural differences. And so at an early age, I really did not like myself, and I was very self-hating in my elementary years, going into my middle school years. Did anybody else ever have those feelings of doubt when you were growing up? Identity issues? And I can't see the chat, so if anybody puts it on the chat, let me see.
There are a lot of
Yeah.
yeses, definitely, I did.
Right. So the question that I have for you is, so how does the school system, or how does the school system combat that, right? How would any of us even know that that's happening in your lives as the school system, as the educator, as the principal, as the teacher, right? So what is our role in that? And that's a good point, Joanna, that sometimes it's our own people that make fun of us, until you step out, and then you're made fun of by other people when you step out to a place when you're no longer the majority and you're the minority, right? There are differences, but I just wanted to point that out, right? What's the role of the educator? What is the role in understanding this? So I'm doing a disservice and trying to go over my life in 20 minutes, but I'm going to do the best I possibly can, because this is where it gets kind of crazy. Okay, this is where it's all these little boxes get in the way, and it just drive me crazy sometimes. So what you see on the very left is, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about this time and where I did a lot of things that I should not have been doing. So I will say that being self-hating, I turned to a lot of things, right? I was in 8th grade, I started doing drugs. I started smoking weed. I started hanging out with a different crowd. And I think many of it might have had to do with me going back and forth with my dad, living with my grandparents, living with my dad. Started smoking weed, started ditching school, started hanging out with people that I should not have been hanging out with. And so what ended up happening in high school is that I became what we call a hustler, right? Anybody know that term, what hustler means? Anybody have any idea what that means when you're a hustler? Anybody? Why don't you tell us what it is, Gus and Alex? Good, that's exactly right. You do work hard, but it's a different kind of hustling, right? It's hustling on the street, okay? Thank you, Calvin. Thank you. Yes, so yes, I was a hustler. So a hustler means I wasn't necessarily in the gang, but I hung out with the gangs, and I would do what we call slang, right? I was slanging, okay? In the interim, I was also, slanging means dealing, I'm sorry. So I was also dealing drugs, but I was also being what we call a runner. So when crack cocaine became big in the 80s, and all the gangsters started selling them, particularly the Crips, okay, they were selling them into different neighborhoods. So what I would do, I was the runner. So I would do the exchange, right? So when a drug transaction happened, I would be involved in the exchange. Okay. There were other things that I did. And the camel that broke the straw that broke the camel's back was me and this one guy wanted some speakers. So we decided to rob a store for some speakers. How dumb is that? Like, how I think back and I go, what? All I wanted was speakers. So we went and robbed the store. And so what was interesting is at the same time in the same city, somebody robbed a jewelry store. So they sent out the description, right? Brown kid, blah, 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 whatever. I ended up getting arrested. I get caught. And this is when I started experiencing a lot of the discrimination and a lot of the policies. When the sheriffs pulled me over, they grabbed me. They put me in the middle of the street, handcuffed me. And they were asking me where the stuff was. They were asking me where the jewelry was. And I thought they were talking about these speakers. But they were talking about the jewelry. So I didn't want to say anything, I wanted to be tough. I'm like, I'm not gonna say, I'm not a snitch, right? I'm not a snitch. So I ended up, the sheriff basically grabbed me, with his baton and threw me against a tree. And then he had like the baton up here against my neck. And he said, you need to tell me where the stuff is at. All right. Or you're not going to walk back into this police car. So I told him where it was, but I ended up, doing time, ended up getting arrested. And all those times that I was doing those exchanges and running around on the street, the police were actually watching us. And so they had evidence. And so what ended up happening is I ended up being locked up, ended up being put away for all the things that I was doing. If you see here, this is called the Ward Rights Handbook. When you're locked up, those are your rights. They give you a Ward's Right Handbooks, which basically says follow the rules and you'll be fine. When I was locked up and when I was inside, I have this is the actual box that I kept. So I kept this box down here on the bottom right. Stop it. Because when you're brought in, they give you a box, you take off all your stuff, whatever you have, you put it in that box, and that's all your possessions and whatever you own. So I kept that box, and I have that box now. I kept all the things that I had in there to serve as a reminder of where I was and where I never ever want to go back to, or anybody I know, right? So when you're locked up, you have absolutely zero freedom. So what did I do when I was in there? Kept getting recruited to be Catholic or Christian multiple times. That's when I became a hardcore Catholic when I was in there. This was my connection to the real world. Those magazines, Sports Illustrated, if you notice, that's when anybody remember when the last time the Dodgers won the World Series besides last year? Anybody know the year? Anybody remember? Wow. Oh, thank you, Ernesto. Oh, thank you. We got some true Dodger fans. Well, when Kirk Gibson hit his home run, I saw that on TV in juvenile hall. That's where I watched it. That's where I saw Kirk Gibson hit that home run when I was in juvie. And the only reason why I got to watch it because the officers wanted to watch it, so they had it on. So I jumped up and down and went to my room happy. But that was my connection to the outside, reading letters and reading magazines. I became a poet. I was writing poems. And here on the right, I hate when you do that, where it says God is. So they really push you, the system in there pushes you to put all your hands in God. Okay? That's what the system does. And so I just wanted to share that with you, that once you go in there, there's another push to take you as a person and turn you into what they want you to turn into, right? And that happened in there multiple times, but in there I was lost. I didn't know anything. All I knew was I just want to eat, sleep, and I want to get out of here. That's all I thought. I just want to get out of this place. But what I did notice when I was in there is only people that were in there were black and brown, right? That's all that were there. And during that time, it was either Crips and Bloods or all the homies from LA, meaning all the LA gangs from San Fernando Valley, gangs from inside, the Florencia, El Monte, all of them. They were all there. And so I had to learn, in order to survive, I had to learn about all these different sets, all these different neighborhoods, and who got along with who and who didn't get along with who, in addition to my own. Because whenever you walk into the space, it's always a threat. So I spent a year and a half in these facilities. But luckily, and I want to share this, in that part of, I call it Quetzalcoatl, precious knowledge, that time, because at that time, all I was doing was gathering knowledge, getting information, reflecting at the same time, but getting information and, like, you know, questioning things, questioning, why am I doing it? How did I end up in a place like this, right? Things you don't even think about. So the next piece is the transformation. And I remember this like it was yesterday. I was supposed to go to a boys' home. I went to court and they said, nope, you're going to stay in here because we need to do psychological evaluation on you because we don't know if you're going to be a lifelong criminal, right? So we need to run a series of tests on you. So I was hoping to get transferred to leave, but I wasn't sure what was going to happen to me. So I was supposed to go somewhere, but I also I wasn't sure when. I was supposed to be transferred out. So inside, and I went to CYA. So I went to juvenile hall, which was a very structured program from 8 in the morning to 9 at night, everything's structured. But when I went to CYA, which is considered junior prison, it was like you eat in the morning, go to your rooms, stay there all day. You get a 3-hour rec time or 2-hour rec time during the day. You have dinner and that's it. It's not structured. And so one of the older veteranos was hitting me up. He wanted me to join the Sureños, right? Because when you go on the inside, all the LA Southern gangs come together as the Sureños. They're all from the South, and they are automatically against all the gangs from the North. This is a total Chicano Latinx things, right? So you have the Northern gangs against the Southern gangs, right? And if you're inside and you are brown, you have to pick one or the other. And so if you say you're not from a gang, they're still going to ask you, well, where do you live? And you kind of automatically get recruited in. So they were trying to recruit me in, and I was trying like my best to say no without saying no, kind of like, oh, I'm just trying to get out of here, man. You know, I'm just trying to do my time. So what happened is during that week, all these cholitos from LA, they rushed this kid who was from Fresno, and they jumped him, right? So they jumped this kid. He wasn't even a gang member. He just said he was from Fresno, and that was enough. So what ended up happening is they put everybody, all the Chicanos, on lockdown, whether you were involved or not. You just got put on lockdown. So we were on lockdown for like 48 hours. We couldn't come out of our room. We had to eat our food in there. And of course I was upset because I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. And so at the same time, there was that lockdown. And I knew the next time we got out of lockdown that they were trying to jump me into the Sureños, right? The Sur 13. They were ready for me to join that piece. And so, and I don't know if this was God or whatever, or the universe, but I ended up getting transferred out that same week. So I ended up getting transferred to another juvenile hall in Silmar, and then I ended up getting, they ended up putting me in a boys' home. So I ended up spending my time at a boys' home, okay? And so over here, and the reason why I have these pictures up is that here, I ended up going to the boys' home, I was happy because I wasn't locked up. And I think, did somebody say they were in a foster home? Okay, so at the foster home, yes. And so the foster home is the least punitive of all the sections you can go to. You can go to juvenile hall, you can go to CYA, you can go to camp, but the least restrictive is the homes, the group homes. Those are the least restrictive, meaning they're not lockdown facilities. So what ended up happening is I did great in the program. And I put this here, and I don't know if you can really see it. I actually started going to junior college from the boys' home. But you had to earn those privileges. So you see, I had to do daily points. So this is my points for going to school, going to the school on campus. So I did pretty well because I want to get the heck out of there. So you get points, you get points, you get points. And I saved this one because it was during this week that I finished going to school in there. And my counselor and therapist, after about 9 months, I had worked my way to go to junior college. Okay. And so I look at that as the turning point, and said, you know what? I actually can go to college, because he put me in a couple of accounting classes. He said I was smart enough. So I was like, okay. And so I ended up going to Pierce College. And today, and my grandparents, who are no longer here, Benny and Weta, I dedicated my degree from USC. I dedicated it to them, because even after all this crazy madness that I went through, they were always there for me. And then when I look back at high school, I'm going to tell you, in high school, I used to smoke a joint all the way to school as I walked to school. And I never made it to first period. I must have had like, 75 absences in the first period. I was ditching school. I was partying. I was, doing all kinds of stuff. And not one adult from any of the high schools that I went to, and I went to 5, not one adult reached out to me at all. No counselor, no teacher, no support staff. Absolutely no one. To me, that is a failure of the system to not reach out to students like myself, or even engage me. So I honor the degree that I earned from USC to my grandparents, and as you can see, how close I am. But the transformation happened from that point on to like, okay, I need to do well with my life. Any questions so far? I'm trying to like go really, really fast, but at least pause. Okay. So, Huitzili Pochli, the will to act. Adelante, Tiawi, moving forward. As your maestra said, your profe has said that I'm a traditional Aztec dancer. That's a whole nother thing that came to be. When I decided when I started learning about my culture, I took a Chicano studies class in junior college, Rio Hondo College. And that kind of made me look at things differently. And then I started realizing like, wow, like, why was I in that prison system? Why did I go through that? And the other thing is I decided I wanted to go into teaching, because teaching was the best way for me to impact our community and help out as much as I possibly could. That for me was my way of giving back. But even as a teacher, and I will share this story with you. I have a little red truck. It wasn't lowered or anything, but, it had some nice rims. I had a system in there. And I started teaching the first summer I had off, so I had to go empty my room. So I had computers and stuff in the back of my truck, and I brought my cousin with me. My cousin helped me. My cousin had a bald head, even though he just came back from the Army Reserves or whatever. So we are driving with this computer equipment in my back truck. I make a right turn, and all of a sudden the sheriff's behind me and pulling us over. Okay. And basically they're asking me the same questions they always ask. Are you high? Do you have any drugs? Do you have any weapons? And of course I say no. And then they pull me out of the car, me and my cousin. They sit us on the curb. They're not asking us anything. And so then after about 10 minutes of sitting there, I'm asking, okay, so what's happening here? And so basically, she said that, my front license plates wasn't where it should be. Like I only had the back license plates, and that's why she pulled me over. Okay, for that reason. And so I didn't believe her. And I don't think that was the case because I've been pulled over many other times as a teacher, as an educator. Most of the time it's not very nice. In the last couple of years, now that I'm an older man and I keep my mouth shut, it's a lot better. I don't argue with the police. I just, okay, thank you very much. But that's when you start realizing, like, that's when it made me more angry, because here I am, a professional educator. I'm still getting treated like this. Like, I got treated like this, when I was inside. I'm like, I'm not gonna be treated like this as a respected professional. So that helped me find my agency in doing danza and in finding ways in which we can help the community. This picture right here is what we call an altar, and those are things that are precious to me. Headdress, that's your profe's headdress, that's my shield, that's our drum. And also that my children, in giving back to the community and displaying pride for who we are, and taking back my identity as an Indigenous person. You're seeing these pictures are of my daughter, and she had a coming of age ceremonia. And there she is right there, where she had, you notice her hair was super long. Like, her hair was down all the way down her back, practically to her behind. And so she had to sacrifice. So we actually had to cut her. Look at her hair. Her hair was all the way down here. And if you see her hair's, we had to just chop it for that ceremony. So, because we had to make the sacrifice. And then I put here, I have this when I was on the school board for 5 years, and my term ended in last year in 2020. That was another way to give back. That was another way of developing my agency. But the other piece also is, how can we, knowing all this information and understanding what you're learning in class, how can we be agents of change, right? And I put the most precious people in my life, I put them at the center of this last one, because everything that I do has to be centered around, my family and the people that you love, right? But before you do that, you got to love yourself. And part of the reasoning that I did all the things I did is I did not love myself. I did not love myself. I had nobody guiding me, and I went to 5 different high schools. Not one adult ever reached out to me at any time to check on me, say how I'm doing, or is there anything issues going on in my life? Maybe it would have helped. Maybe it would have been too late. I don't know, but nobody did. And so for every person that's like me, because the system will hold up somebody like me and say, you know what? You worked hard. You overcame all these obstacles. You are blah, 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 blah. And that's true, right? We do have to overcome a lot of obstacles. But I want you to understand, for every one of me, there's about 20,000 students who don't make it. To set those, I don't know how many times I sat with all the homies, and how many times they would tell me, hey, you know what? I'm not going to come. When I walk out those doors, I'm not going to come back. I am not going to come back. You're not going to see me, When I go out, I'm just going to kick it with my woman. I'm just going to stop the craziness, right? That's what they would say. A month later, who do I see come back walking through the doors again, coming back to juvenile hall, coming back to CYA? The same homie, right? The same little vato, okay? And it's just a pattern. It's just a repeated pattern. So many people that I knew that were going to change, they were going to do this and this and that. But the reality is they don't. And that's where we as a system, like, we're failing our students, right? And so my story is one of triumph. It's one of tragedy. And I didn't get to all the details. I just wanted to be quick, kind of hit you with stuff. But it is one of triumph in the sense, like, that did graduate, am moving forward. But we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do, right, in dismantling the system. So before I open it up to questions, I will ask everyone this, right? What is my role in dismantling systemic oppression, right? What is your role in that? After I went through all this tragedy and trauma in my life, I think I figured it out, you know, in dismantling systemic oppression. I think I've got it, right? But we're still moving forward. So the professor's doing some great things. And in my class, for my classes, this is my screen, right? I always say to my students, we are beautiful people and you have to love yourself. Gotta love yourself. You gotta have that self-love, right? To take you to other places, right? So wherever you walk, wherever you go, you are strong in who you are, where you come from, and you have that love for yourself, okay? So we're beautiful people, y'all. We're very beautiful people. In Lakesh, tú eres mi otro yo. You are my other me. Come back, or if you need to go back to your ancestral knowledge, talk to, you know, the older people in your families. Ask them, you know, if you're, or how they came to be, or if they had to go through any types of obstacles or discrimination, because it's real. It's real. And maybe you have yourselves. But me being locked up for for so long, and then coming out and then becoming a teacher and still experiencing forms of discrimination and racism as a professional educator, that really, that angered me more than when I learned about our history and all the struggles that we've had as a people, right? So that's the question I have for you all. What is your role in dismantling systemic oppression? And I will stop right there. And if you have any questions or specific questions, I'm more than willing to answer them.
Okay, y'all, so now's your turn to unmute and to share your voices, your beautiful, powerful voices, for any questions or comments, any stories of your own that you might want to share. I just figured it would be a really good way to listen to Gabriel's story and how it ties into the school to prison pipeline. So we hear an actual real life story, and it's not just a statistic, it's not just from a video, it's not just from a slide, but actual real people going through this, okay? So I invite you to unmute. Anybody have questions or comments?
I could. First, I want to say thank you for sharing all that. Like, it's inspirational, obviously. But yeah, just everything you talked about. Like, I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to actually have good English teachers that kind of showed me that I could be more than I was. But I had other friends who, you know, school isn't for everybody, but doesn't mean that you just give up on somebody. And I think, and like one of them, like literally my best friend from like elementary school, like to this day, he's still like hooked on drugs, like didn't go anywhere. But it started in high school, you know, like being late, being tardy, having absences, and next thing you know, they're handcuffing him, bringing him to school, like literally, like what did that teach? That didn't teach him anything. That didn't help him in any way at all. After that, you know, he's just constantly in the system, into juvie, out of juvie, into like jail, out of jail, like just, you know, just terrible. Like, I don't know, he just never figured it out. So yeah, just to answer your question, like for me, it's like as an educator, like I want to become an educator to, you know, shed light on those kids that are that lost, especially if they're like, you know, people of color or whatever, like children that just have it way harder than others. Just, you know, we need to be there for them.
Thank you, Edna.
And the fact that you even recognize and notice that and understand that is already going to make you a better educator, because you're already aware and cognizant of that, and you're going to be looking for that, right? I'm not going to let any of those students fall through the crack on my watch, right? So appreciate that. Look forward to seeing you in the education world.
Takes one teacher to, you know, change, you know, a whole classroom. So it's pretty cool.
It really does. It really does. Thank you for sharing that. And keep an eye out for us in the education world, Ernesto, okay? Other comments and questions?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. You said that you got into Catholicism while you were away. I was just wondering if there was like positive aspects that you were able to take away from it and that helped you basically just change the way that you were living and everything like that?
Well, like I said, I was raised Catholic, and so when I was there, and I can't disrespect or say anything bad about it, because all of us, and I tell you, you would probably trip out, all the number of homies, all the little cholos, we're all doing the rosary together, right? We're all like, "Da, da, 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 da. I just want to get out of here. I just want to get out of here. Hail Mary, blah, 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 I want to get out of here." So I appreciate that, and I appreciate that we kind of use that to stay kind of together. And I think that whatever spirituality you lend yourself to, like, yeah, it absolutely will work for you in whatever way you make it work for yourself. But Catholicism, yeah, that's what happened to me. What was interesting is that it was always seemed to be like this tug of war as to, there's the Christian person trying to get me to become Christian. There's this Catholic person trying to become Catholic. And I was like, I just want to get out of here. I just want to get out of here. I just want to leave. But good point. Good point. Good point. I did lean on that in there, and I give thanks to that.
Great questions. Who wants to speak next?
If you want to ask me how the food was, you can ask me how the food was, or if I got any fights in there. You can ask me those kinds of questions too. I don't mind. I like to keep it real.
Was it difficult for you to get into the college program that you got into through the home with because you didn't have like a high school diploma?
Well, what's interesting is junior colleges at that time, they didn't require a high school diploma. So you could just walk on campus and start taking classes. Fortunate for me, at that boys' home, there was this man named Carl Pitlinski. Okay, and he recognized how smart I was, right? He's like, you're smart, like book smart too. You're not just street smart. And he's the one who suggested it. So they kind of set it up. Like I didn't have to do all the, I had to fill out applications, but they kind of really helped set that up for me. So I am thankful. I am thankful for the boys' home, for what the boys' home did to me. And, in retrospect, it's like, maybe this should have happened, because maybe if I would have stayed on the streets, I don't think I would have survived very long. So maybe it was a good thing, but going through it, I would have preferred another way to learn, but sometimes we're just so thick-headed. But no. And then when I transferred, I went to Rio Hondo College. And so when I wanted to go to USC, they only look at your junior college transcripts. They didn't even look at my high school stuff. So that was the advantage of junior colleges, is once you start attending junior college, they don't even look at your high school stuff. And I was like, thank God, because there's nothing to look at.
I think Brittany had her hand. Go for it, Brittany. The mic is yours.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect, because I'm on my phone, so I've not done this from my phone before. I was just gonna comment on pretty much the fact that like everything you pointed out was very much accurate, and me being a white female, I will say for sure that like this does affect people of color specifically. Being, as like I said in the post, that like I was one of the only 3 like white girls in the whole vicinity, and this vicinity that I was in for the long term was actually in Pasadena, Rosemary. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it was in Pasadena, and that's such like a supposedly really nice place, but it was in like the dumpiest place with like the oldest buildings, like the worst food. And for you to say that like that was kind of, like a luxury, like I would never be able to understand like how being in a correctional facility, especially a boys correctional facility, would be like. So thank you for sharing that. And also with the whole school system, I've been in and out of like different schools pretty much my whole entire, I don't even know how many schools I've been to because I moved around so much. But yeah, my last year of school, it just took this group of people that were willing to treat me like, a student and not a number. you know, or just another person coming in and out that actually made me like want to finish. They were telling me like, no, you're going to finish. Like, we're going to get you to finish. So yeah. So thank you for all the work that you and Veronica do. You guys are very inspiring.
Thank you.
But yes, I just wanted to comment on that. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
You know, you remind me of my story of when I left the locked up facility for the first time. And I actually was able to, because whenever we get transferred, you have to get shackled up, you get on the bus with everybody. And then you know, in the back of the, you know, those big sheriff buses that you guys see on the freeway, like, it's not fun when you're inside those, that's for sure. Because I remember just like, God, I wish I was out there. But when they came to take me from the boys' home, they came in a regular van. Like, they just came in a regular van. And so we actually got to they gave me my box, right? I had my box that I carried with me. And I was able to put regular clothes on and get in a regular van and drive to the boys' home. And I was just like, I was just like, oh yeah, this is great. And then they said, hey, we're gonna go drive to the liquor store tonight at 5 o'clock, right? So get your dollars, you can buy candy. Oh, what, we're going to the liquor store? Oh, awesome, I'm in. I don't have any money, but I just want to go. I just want to be in the van and just get off and, you know, walk in the liquor store and walk out. So I remember that so vividly, and this all brought up a lot of memories. But appreciate your comments. Appreciate your comments, y'all.
Yes, Brittany, thank you for sharing your story. Anyone else have questions or comments?
Oh, sorry. Hi, this is Leticia.
Hi, Leticia.
Thank you so much to both of you for having this discussion. I have a comment and a question, and one goes back to this discussion about foster care. Having worked with support services that help our foster families, Gabriel, you had mentioned how some of the other programs tend to be more punitive than foster care, but I also would like to add that it can also be detrimental, especially when children are placed with families that are not from their own ethnic background. And if those families don't understand the importance of understanding the cultures of those children, or helping those children really take ownership over that. And I'm seeing that personally with a friend who fostered and now adopted her own children, and just how that disconnect can really affect the kids. So I just wanted to add that. And then my question was, I'm curious, you haven't mentioned your Korean background, and I'm wondering if that's something that you're connected to as well.
No, it's actually something that I'm conflicted with to this day. I'm still conflicted with that because, you know, racially, my mother's Korean from Korea. But, you know, whatever happened between her and my dad, and whatever family stories are out there, they separated when I was 2 years old, and my mother went on her own way. But, you know, she didn't have a very good life. Her life was just absolutely horrible because she was an immigrant who didn't speak the language and was brought to another country, which she didn't know anything about. The only people she knew was the people she came with, and her only son. And so the sad part is, I went to Korea when I was 2. I know I went there. I have pictures of me, a baby, but I don't have any connection to my Korean culture, or because I was raised in Pico Rivera by my Mexican-American grandparents. And now that I follow my indigenous philosophies and looking at my own on the Mexican side. But I think maybe when I'm thinking maybe when I'm older that I'll take more of a hard look at it, and maybe look for my mother, because my mother's out there somewhere. And it's sad because I don't feel bad about not looking for my mother, because I don't have a connection or relationship. And that's what I feel bad about it, because like, that's my mother, but she didn't raise me. I had no connection to her. I don't know anything about her, but I feel bad just because like, it's still my mother, but I don't. Yeah. So yeah, I need therapy for that. So I'm still working on that. I'm still working on that piece.
Thank you for your question and your comment, Leticia. There's another question. Isabella, you want to go ahead and unmute? Ask your question, girl.
Knowing that you haven't like had any connection with like your mom or anything like that, have your kids ever asked you anything about their grandparents or anything like that? Because I know like I would sometimes ask that to my mom about her dad.
No, they do. I can only tell them what I know. I don't. There's a lot I don't know, right? Because my family's like hush hush about it. But I'll share this much, okay? My mother had to do what she needed to do to survive. She just did whatever she needed to do to survive. And that meant she had to do absolutely whatever was necessary, and she did. And so, you know, that was hard for me. And I had to figure all this stuff out on my own. Like nobody sat down and said, this is what I just had to like put everything together. She used to visit me in school, and I was embarrassed of her. I didn't even want her to come visit me, you know, because she looked Korean, and that's what I was getting in fights at school for. So, but I think that I had two friends, Mary Garcia and Julianne, who were very nice to me, and my mom. But my kids asked, but I can only tell them what I know. I said, "This is your grandmother, and this is your grandmother from your Korean side," and they asked me. I can only be honest with them. I'm not going to hide anything from them. But I did wait till they were older before I told them, you know, more details when I felt they could handle it. Good question, though. Yeah, and it is relevant. But I'm going to tell you right now, let somebody run up on me, it's going to be a different story. Run up on this half Asian.
Any other questions or comments, folks? And then also, if you want to share any of your own stories about, I mean, obviously you all made it here, right, to a university. That doesn't mean that you didn't have barriers or challenges. Everyone, no matter what our background is, we all have challenges. It's never just an easy thing like, here you go. Nothing's ever handed to us, no matter what our skin color is, right? But some folks have more barriers than others, right? Because we do live in a very racialized country. And that's just what it is. And we do deal with a lot of systemic, structural, intentionally designed racism. You know, it's there, it's in our face. It's very much, you know, coming to surface in a lot of different ways. It always has, but even more so today in different ways, right? In contemporary times, every day you turn on the news and there's something going on that has to do with race and racism, like every day. So this isn't anything new. It's just that there's more of a spotlight on it right now. It's something that we've been dealing with for generations upon generations upon generations, right? So this is generational trauma. And we get so used to it at times that we forget that we're swimming in it because it's so normalized. And so that's why it's important to have discussions like this and have classes like this so that we can peel away those layers that tend to hide the reality or tend to normalize, right? But we peel it away so we can talk about like, wait a minute, why is it that we're going through this? Why is it that my family went through such and such and such and such? Why is it that that was so difficult to go through? Why is it that I made it to the university, but 10 of my cousins didn't? And yeah, we have 10 and even more cousins, right? Because we come from big families. But you know, I come from a huge family, and I was the first in my family to go to a university. And you know, we come from brilliant people. So I shouldn't have been the first. I should have been the 20th or something, right? But I wasn't. I was the first. I was the first to attend a university in this country. And thankfully, the next generation, you know, my siblings' kids and my kids, the next generation, which is the second generation, now, you know, they have better chances of going to colleges and universities, and they've taken advantage of that. But it gets a little bit easier with every generation, but there's still so many barriers because we're still dealing with institutionalized racism. And that doesn't mean we can't do it. We can, but it isn't fair that so many barriers are intentionally put in our way. Like that shouldn't be the case. Alex, please unmute.
Don't be shy. You're in college now.
Let's hear your voice.
Educated adults.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
All right. Yeah, but I have like a similar story as like one of my childhood best friends. Similar to how you were talking earlier, how I said you were hustling, you were out there in the streets hustling. Well, I had a well, I still have my best friend. We grew up together since elementary school, and like we would always do everything together. He was a football player. He loved sports. We love sports.
Yeah.
And his dream was to go pro, you know, like every teenage kid that always like watches football, he wanted to go pro. And for him, he had a greater chance. He was athletic, like really good. He was super athletic. He loved playing sports. And he started playing like flag football since he was like maybe in elementary. And then from there it just progressed. And once we started getting to elementary or middle school and then high school is when like things just started to go downhill from there. We didn't know why. It's just randomly he just started doing things out of the ordinary. He started doing drugs. He started taking pills. He just started doing lots of stuff. And then for I think our 8th grade year, he stopped. He cleaned up. He wasn't, you know, he went back to sports. He wanted to go to I think he wanted to go to a good high school because he wanted to be looked at as a prospect for a D1 college. And he just continued grinding and just, you know, practicing for football and stuff like that. And then I believe it was our senior year where he went back. He continued. He stopped playing football. He was playing on our team, and then just didn't tell the coaches anything. Just stopped showing up, and he became distant from us. And like I think maybe a month later we haven't heard from him, and then next time we know, we ended up, you know, hearing that he was in he got picked up by federal police, and next thing we know he was in a federal prison. And it was for hustling. He was selling drugs. He wanted to do a big score, and he got set up. It was a sting from the cops. And when he sold the product is when they busted into the room and just guns drawn and everything, and everyone he was with was just arrested. And then we heard it from their family. His family is the one that called our family and let us know, like, because they were worried. They didn't know where he was until they finally got that phone call and said, hey, your son's in federal prison. And then his dad was the one that was always just there, like pushing him, wanting him to like be better, you know, go to college and play football, because he had scholarships, but he threw it all away once he started like selling and he saw the money coming in. He was like, you know what, like, you know, I'm done. Like, I'm getting money now. Like, I don't need this. And that's when, you know, that last big score is what really, like, you know, just kind of pinched him. And then his whole life is just down from there.
Once you go down that road, like it's never ending. And then I know we have to leave, so I'm gonna address Ricardo's question real quick. He said, "What part of of Mexico is your father from?" I'm actually like 3rd generation. So my grandparents are actually Chicanos. Okay, but they went through a lot of discrimination here, and you know, they got hit for speaking Spanish at school and all that other good stuff. So they kind of beat the Mexican out of us. I had to come back and relearn everything myself. But my family is actually from Michoacan, and my great grandmother, who's indigenous, she came over during the revolution of Mexico in 1910. Okay. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate this time. My partner, Mayan Lakesh, thank you for this. I always love having these discussions, and I'm willing to share my story so we can all learn and grow from it as well. So you have a great class. You guys have some great questions. You all give us hope for the future, definitely. So thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing your story. I'm so glad that you got to visit my students and be in class with us. I just want to remind you all that on Wednesday is Cesar Chavez Day. Okay, so celebrate that in a good way, See how you can do something positive on that day and keep that legacy going. So there's no class that day. Enjoy your day. And then also Brittany wanted to share a quick announcement that might give you all an opportunity for some extra credit or something. Okay, Brittany, you go ahead and share.
Hi, I just wanted to let everybody know that there is an art show going on that has a lot of Chicano and Latinx influence. I went there on Saturday and it's really cool. It's free. Here's like a little kind of taste of, well, you can see it, not really that well. But that's the flyer. And then I'm gonna put in the chat the location and the dates. It should be, I think, over those articles.
Yeah, send a link in the chat. If not, email me and then I'll share it with everyone else. But again, thank you, everybody. This was such a great discussion. Thank you, Gabriel, for sharing your story. I'm going to invite you all, as I usually do, to go ahead and unmute so you can give your thanks and your goodbyes.
Appreciate your time out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Peace out, everyone. Like I tell my students, hasta la pasta.
Thanks for sharing. That was really interesting.
Thank you. Thank you.